I'm super excited to be here. And my name is Meghan. I am a physician assistant. My clinical practice is currently in emergency medicine. And I teach full-time at a PA program in New England. I've been doing that for 3 years. And for a couple of years now, I've been sitting on their admissions committee. So I'm hopeful that I can demystify some of the things about the admissions process for you all. And one of my things as someone that sits on that committee is we want everyone to be successful. And I think the biggest thing that I want people to know is that we're rooting for you. And my personal goal is to try to take a lot of the secrecy and like the guesswork out of the admissions process so that students feel like they have some clarity and we can sort of give you the path to success, and then you choose to sort of walk down that path. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, we'll get into all kinds of good things. Tell us a little bit just about your journey to becoming a PA and what that looked like and how you ended up here.
Yeah. So interestingly, I went to Quinnipiac University, and when I entered my undergraduate education my freshman year, I knew I was in their sort of pre-PA program. So I did a 4 to 2 year sort of direct admission program. And so that was very interesting because, to be honest, I kind of fell into it. Like when I was applying into undergrad programs, I applied to a variety of programs. So RN programs, nurse practitioner programs, PA programs, some pre-med programs. I knew that I wanted to be somewhere in medicine, but wasn't really sure where that was. And just felt like I wanted to cast a broad net. And then I ended up getting into this PA program, and the component of, the 4 and 2 was really attractive to me at the time and ended up working well. So that's what brought me there. When I was in undergrad, part of being in that program was I had to work really hard to get a lot of clinical hours because I was very young and didn't have any experience in medicine prior to starting undergrad. So I did a lot of my hours as a certified nursing assistant in a surgical environment, like on a surgical floor. And I learned so much there. It's been like one of my most, I think, prized and precious experiences. I learned a lot about what it meant to take care of sick people and just really learned how to connect with people and sort of fell in love with medicine at that time. So that was great. And then when I graduated from PA school, to be honest, I didn't really know what I wanted to do because I liked a whole bunch of different things. So I went on an emergency medicine interview and they decided that they wanted to hire me. And I was like, great, I have loans to pay. This works well. And then I ended up falling in love with it. And I've been in emergency medicine for 10 years. So yeah, I was sort of someone that didn't really have a direct path. And so I kind of just let things happen as they did naturally, and it ended up working well.
Oh, that's awesome. So you worked in slowly clinical for how long? I don't know how to phrase that.
In clerkship, when I was in undergrad, my clinical hours.
No, how long were you before you went into academics, I guess is the question.
Yeah.
So how did that transition happen, I guess is the question.
Yeah, sure. So I was in clinical medicine for 7 years. And it was interesting because after my first year working as an emergency medicine PA, I started hosting and teaching students on their clinical rotations in the clerkship phase of their learning. So I started teaching really soon after graduating. And then about 7 years into my career, so 3 years ago, I made a jump from, full-time clinical work to academic medicine. And that was really interesting. It came at a time in my life where I was just ready for a bit of something different. And I knew I really liked teaching. And it was sort of something new to fall in love with.
Cool. So what roles have you fulfilled as far as academics, or what kind of does that look like now?
Yeah. So I teach in the program. I'm responsible for teaching students all of the clinical skills that we use. So I teach history taking, I teach physical exam skills, I teach a lot of the emergency medicine and acute care topics, a lot of procedural skills. Uh, I spend like a full day in class with students every Monday, working with them like pretty much like one-on-one in very small groups. So they get a lot of like individual attention, which is great. And in our particular program, we use team-based learning. And we also have like a big like series of simulated patient encounters. So we have patient actors that come in, and students spend a lot of time in the first year doing simulated visits, which is great because they really work on developing skills and feel ready for the second year.
That's awesome. So, how do I phrase this? Okay, so how would you instruct a student to look for programs? Like, it sounds like your program has some really cool stuff, but I feel like sometimes students have trouble kind of differentiating what programs offer. So
Sure.
how would you recommend a student goes about actually kind of researching programs? I guess what questions should they be asking when they go on tours or at interviews, maybe? That may be the best way to put it.
So one thing that I think when I'm thinking about students that are applying, there are a couple of things that I think of. The first thing that I think about is cost. Because I know that a lot of students have undergraduate loans that they're trying to pay off. And the cost of like traveling to a school to visit like an in-person, information session or without necessarily the guarantee of an interview is really hard. So the first thing that I really encourage pre-Ps to do is to take advantage of everything that's online. So if schools are hosting online information sessions, absolutely drop into those or listen to the recording. Those are a really great opportunity to get like specific hints and tips about programs for certain. We give a lot of valuable information in those sessions. The other thing too is that, the RPA requires that we publish on our websites, certain information for students about our admissions process. So because that's required in the standards for us to be able to, be credentialed as a program, I always direct people to like a specific institution's website. So for example, on our website, we actually give students like the categories that are on our grading rubric. So when I pull up an application in CASPA, I have a rubric next to it that has like a series of 10 categories. And those 10 categories are the things that we've listed on our website that are important to us. So some of those things are like leadership, volunteerism, those types of things. So I always tell students, like, never leave any portion of the application blank because the categories are only there to help you. They're never going to hurt you. And so, for example, when I see an application that comes in and there's like nothing in the leadership category that's listed, I think to myself, oh my gosh, I could have just given you like 5 points for any type of leadership experience that you've had. So definitely utilize like looking at websites and then filling in all parts of the application, I think is really important.
Yeah, no, that's great advice. What, I guess, roles have you fulfilled in admissions? Because I don't think PA students or pre-PA students realize the process. And because PA school is so quick, it's pretty constant that you're trying to get that next class ready.
Yeah. So that's a really great point. We really try and make evidence-based decisions. And so by that, I mean, we do a lot of review of data and try and be good scientists. So we look at the statistics of, the admissions, data that we have, and then how students perform in the program, what the pass rate is on the board exam, and try and figure out what type of student is going to be successful in our program. We would never want to accept a student that we didn't think could graduate and pass the pants. We're not just trying to, bring you to our program to pay a lot of loans and then not be able to graduate. So we really try and let those numbers guide us, and we're good about like publishing those numbers so that students have a good idea of like where they stand. And then if, they're sort of have a little bit of a lower maybe GPA, they can work before they get here to improve that. And in the process of improving your GPA, what you're really doing is improving your skill set. right? So that by the time you get to PA school, you're ready and you're going to be successful. We don't like to have to delay people if they don't perform well. So that's one of the things that we work really hard on. The other thing that we work really hard on is really trying to diversify our student body. And I mean that in every sense of the word. It's important to us that we have people from a variety of backgrounds that have had a variety of like life experiences, and people who are not currently present in the healthcare system, and patients need to see people like them taking care of them. So we're always trying to work on that.
Okay, so would you say, or can you say, if there is one part of the application that you think is the most important?
It really depends on the school. So every school is going to weight different parts of the application differently. So for example, like one portion of my rubric might have like the GPA might be worth a lot, and the personal statement might be worth a lot, and other things might be worth less. But that there's no standardization of that across all of the programs. So it's really hard to tell like per program which part sort of gets you the most like points, so to speak. So I think as long as you're putting your best foot forward in all categories, like that's your best bet to like rise to the top of the pool to get an interview.
Okay. So this is a two-part question. The first part, is there anything on an application, so the actual CASPA part, or if y'all use CASPA, that stands out? Because I've looked at a lot of applications, and after a while, they kind of look very similar. And I feel like sometimes it's hard to judge someone on paper versus when you actually talk to them. So is there anything that makes someone, like you look at their application, you go, I need to meet this person. They seem awesome.
Yeah. So I think two things to me, there are actually three things that I think that sort of catch my eye. All of the things catch my eye. If you have something in every category, I love that. Like if you've taken the time to complete the application fully and you have something listed in every category, that's step one for me. I would say step two is I really like looking at healthcare hours, like healthcare and direct patient contact hours. I like seeing the time that people have invested getting to know medicine. Obviously, like a higher number of hours is better, but I don't discourage people from applying. You know, if you meet the minimum criteria, go ahead and apply. You know, you can always reapply if you don't get in on the first attempt. If you can financially afford to do that, because the application process is expensive. And so I'd say that, and then personal statements are, I read everyone and I read every word. And so that's what kind of differentiates you from everybody else is your healthcare hours and your personal statement. Something that I sort of like maybe giggle at sometimes is people sometimes will be very poetic in the opening line of their, like they try and tell me like a story and paint like a landscape and draw a picture with words. And I'm kind of like, I really love that you're a really good creative writer. I want to hear about you, right? I want to hear about what you've done and like an experience that you've had with a patient or an experience that you've had in your life. I want to hear about how you personally overcame struggle. You know, I think it's awesome that like there was a code that happened in your emergency department. And if you want to write about that code, that's fine. But if you sort of spend all of the statement telling me about what happened in the code, I don't hear anything about you. So I think hearing about how you contributed to whatever that event is that you're writing about is what really like pulls someone into my mind. So I'm like, oh, okay, this shows resilience. This shows creativity. This shows a lot of compassion. So make sure that you write the specific behaviors and actions that you took to contribute to the wellness of the patient or your team.
That is such great advice. I read a lot of statements too, and I always tell them, you know, if I learned more about Mrs. Smith, and I can tell you about her husband and her children and her what she likes for dinner, then I didn't learn enough about you, and all I can tell you is that you took care of her, like, and I don't really know what that meant to you. So I've definitely seen very similar things, even in what I would probably call like a well-written essay, like you said, like it's very well written, but the meat of it just isn't there, unfortunately. Okay, on the flip side of that, any red flags? Or the most common, or the ones that are just like, you probably should have fixed that before you submitted your application?
Yeah. I guess I'm always curious about when the process of how people ask for letters of recommendation. So you should ask people for letters of recommendation that, first of all, are very dependable and that you know have the time to write you a good letter of rec. And if they're willing to share that letter of recommendation with you before they submit it, even better.
Do you get some kind of like weird ones, or ones that you can tell are just
sometimes
like...
Sometimes I get things that are very generic.
Yeah.
So it reads like someone Google searched letter of recommendation and sort of just filled in the student's name and wrote like a couple of sentences. And I'm always sad because, one, I don't think it's fair to the applicant. I think, if you agree to write someone a letter of reference, like, do good work, right? This is someone's life and they're trusting you. So I think, the part of that applicants have control over is like, think about how reliable this person is. And the people that you ask should really be people that are going to give you a glowing recommendation. Like, they're the person that's going to be super sad if you leave, and they know you well, and you can trust them to sit down and write you a really nice letter. Because when I don't see really nice letters, I'm kind of just left like wondering, sort of, and then I just have to rely more heavily on the personal state.
That's really good advice. That's not something that I would say has come up here that much when talking to programs. So, and it is one of those parts that as the applicant, you don't necessarily know what is being sent in. I mean, you hope that it's good, you think it's good, but you really don't 100% know. So that's really interesting.
One thing too is on the CASPA application, it says basically like recommend, like do not recommend, and then like recommend with highest level of, my highest level of recommendation. So it's okay to like respectfully ask someone that you're going to ask to write a letter of reference for you to say, would you be willing to give me your highest level of recommendation? And if they say yes, great. If they say like, oh, gee, I don't know, or let's talk more about that, maybe that's not the person to write your letter.
That's really good advice. Yeah, I think people don't realize that. I've written letters for people, and basically you sign in, you have to sign into CASPA, kind of make up this little account type thing, and then you actually there's a few little characteristics you have to rate the applicant on, and then you basically say, I do recommend, like you said, highly recommend, or I do not recommend, and then you upload your letter. So it's not just the letter. There are some kind of metrics there too that go along with it.
Absolutely.
Okay, so if someone, first talking about healthcare experience, patient care experience, and I want to ask you specifically about, let's say, undergrad students. Do you take into account, because this is a question that comes up a lot, do you take into account, this person has been an undergrad, but they still were able to get this many hours, but it's not as much as this person who's been out of school for 3 years and gotten this many hours? I mean, how much does that play into, like, can you see that? Or is it just, more is better? I don't know.
Sure. So I think a lot of different programs have different thoughts on this. I'll share my perspective, and I can share sort of the perspective of what comes up in our faculty discussions on admissions committee. So one of the things that we really try to look out for when we're meeting as a faculty team is thought distortions. So an example of a thought distortion would be all students that are younger are inexperienced, or all students that are younger are immature. That is an all or nothing statement. So it's a distorted thought that's an all or nothing statement that's making a general statement that just because someone is, of X years of age means that they don't have the skills. And that's simply just not true. So I think part of it is when we're talking about candidates, just watching out for those types of biases, whether they're unconscious or conscious, and pointing them out to the team and saying, like that statement, could we consider if that's a distorted thought? Like, these are this applicant's strengths. And like, when you actually look at the level of experience that they've had, it's actually comparable to some of our applicants that are older, right? And so I don't so much look at age. I try to look at what type of experiences had they had. How many hours do they have? Does it meet the minimum criteria? And then what does the rest of their application show me as a total person? So I would say if you're applying coming right from undergrad, apply. We accept plenty of students that are coming right from undergrad that they just, if anything, I think as a younger student, it just shows that you've worked really, really hard during your undergraduate years to get all of those hours. And that's impressive, especially if you carry a good GPA. That just shows me you're a hard worker. So we graduate many applicants from our program that are 23, 24. I was 24 when I started.
Me too.
So I was super young, and, I think I'm doing okay. So, yeah. And the same thing for older applicants, on the other end of the spectrum. We had someone in our class that was in her 50s and was an excellent student. And so I think you really have to look at people as individuals, and we really try very hard not to make generalizations and really look at each applicant as who they are as a package.
I think that'll be reassuring for students to hear.
Yeah.
So after, I guess y'all have decided, you like someone on paper, kind of, I guess, the same questions in an interview. What stands out? What's a red flag?
Yeah, so I can sort of demystify the process a little bit in terms of what our interview process is like. And we send this out to all of our applicants that we ask for interviews. So I'm not disclosing anything that's secrecy. We have a really great interview day. We like to think that we're courting people to come to our program. So we really want to make a good impression. And we see it more as an opportunity for mutual fit. So not just that we're interviewing you, but that you're also interviewing us. And so at my program, when I'm interviewing people, I really try and have a conversation. So right when someone walks in the door, and I don't know if all programs are like this, but I'll speak for my program and my interview style. When someone walks in the door, the first thing I do is say, hi, I'm Professor Riveros. I'm so glad you're here. Can I get you anything? And then I say, I just want to let you know that I'm really here to be your advocate. My job is to have a conversation with you and learn more about you. I'm going to try and draw out your best assets so I can present those to the admissions committee. Does that sound good to you? And then people automatically, they relax a little bit. And then I feel like I really get to know, who they are. And honestly, I've been interviewing people now for 4 years. I haven't really had any bad interviews. All of the interviews that I have are really, really good. And I tell them, I really wish that we could accept everybody. And if you don't get accepted here, you will get accepted somewhere else. If not this cycle, then next. So don't give up on pursuing your dream. These are the things I think, and I will list for them the specific gifts that I think they have and why we need those in medicine, because it's very competitive. It can be discouraging. And I think we're in an environment where we need all hands on deck in the world. So I hope that that's what our interview process feels like when people come and meet with us.
That's amazing and very different than some of the interviews I had.
Yeah.
where I almost feel like, which this was, I guess, it was like 7 years ago. And so I don't know if the atmosphere has changed, but, it was more of a, you're lucky to be here. You need to prove yourself to us, prove you're worthy, type thing. And I mean, to the point where that's intimidating as an applicant, for sure. So I definitely had interviews like that. I did have one interview more similar to what you're describing, where the interviewer said to me, because I was a senior in college, and she said, looking at your application and for your age and where you're at in school, you've done a lot. And just for her to say that was so validating for me, because, I mean, your parents may tell you that, or your friends, like, oh, you're always doing all this stuff. But to have someone who's in this, position, who's essentially judging you and making these really big decisions about your life, kind of recognize your efforts, really felt good, especially after my first interview experience, where it was more like I didn't really know if they'd even seen my application, and a lot more stressful. So I personally appreciate that you treat applicants like that, and I'm sure they appreciate that too, because even now I'll go back and help with our PA program. And I've helped with admissions some, but even the PA students doing like simulated patients, and I'll be the patient or be judging them, they are so nervous, and they really just want to do a good job, and they really really want this so badly. And so I never want to be the person to crush their dream. And like you said, I always tell them, you did a great job. I would love to be your patient one day, and try to let them know that. So
absolutely.
Yeah, no, that's so no bad interviews. That's good.
Yeah, I think we use a lot too of behavioral based questions, and we ask everybody the same questions. So we really standardize our approach so that everyone gets a fair and equitable interview. And so we use a lot of behavioral based questions. So very much tell me about a specific time when. So that we really sort of draw those stories out.
Yeah, I had a behavioral interview and I really enjoyed it because of that. And I could tell definitely the difference in my answers just based on how the questions were asked. And so I think that is very effective. I'll tell people, if I asked you, how do you study versus tell me about a time you had to study to be successful, how would you answer that? It's going to be completely different, but it's essentially the same. And so trying to teach people to think like that, I think helps them to get a little more in depth with their answers too. Mm-hmm. And
agree.
One thing I've seen is I feel like there's a lot of just, which I get because everyone's nervous, lack of confidence. And I think, like you said, if you meet the minimums apply, you're qualified, and somebody will always have a better GPA or a better grade in a class or more hours, but that doesn't mean that you're any less going to be as great of a student as they are, and I'm sure y'all have seen that. We had a huge variety in my class, and we had 44 students, different ages, different experience, different backgrounds, and that's what made it fun and interesting, because we got to learn from each other, so it was kind of cool.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah,
absolutely. I think I always tell students sometimes stress and anxiety does good things for us, and I would think that a healthy emotional response on a day when you have a high stakes interview like this would be some anxiety. Your body is just telling you this is a very exciting high stakes experience. I've been working really hard. And so it totally makes sense to me that you'd be feeling anxious. I think that's really common. I think everybody feels that. And we feel that too. We feel that too. We want to make good decisions and we want to help you. And so I think it's absolutely normal and a healthy response to feel a little nervous on interview day, and know that everyone is in the same position as you are. So everyone is feeling nervous when they're saying it, whether they're saying it or not. Everyone's on the same playing field in terms of that.
No, totally agree. Okay, one last question, because we don't talk about this too much, but What would be your advice for re-applicants? So someone who either doesn't get an interview or does get an interview and just doesn't get accepted that year. Any advice for kind of what you'd be looking for or recommend them do?
I think some programs are willing to give feedback. Some will not, and I understand the reason why. Part of it is because they want to be fair and equitable. And so some programs really strongly feel that in order to be fair and equitable, if they can't give advice to all of the applicants that they didn't accept, that they unfortunately can't give, feedback to everybody. The problem with that is that it really doesn't let students know, like, where they can improve. And so I think that coaching is a great idea. I think going back and taking some time to self-reflect is a good idea. If there are things that you can do to put yourself higher in the pool, like working towards increase your GPA. I want to say a note on that too, because I think this is important. What I'm looking for when someone comes back and maybe they've had a lower GPA in the past, and they ask me, what can I do to improve my GPA? What I'm looking for when people go back to school to take those courses that maybe they've failed or gotten a lower course grade in is I do want to see that you can take that class over and get a high grade. But if you're taking that one class at a time, that doesn't show me that you can take multiple difficult courses at the same time. So an applicant that that maybe had a couple of courses, maybe you had 2 or 3 courses that you had lower grades in. I want to see you take those 2 or 3 courses at the same time. And I want to see you do really well in all of them, because that shows me that something has changed in the way that you study, that you're able to handle like a large academic workload and get a higher grade. Because that's what K school is. It's a lot of academic work all at the same time, and you have to get, good. We don't put as much focus on grades in school, but you have to maintain the minimum GPA to progress in the program. So that's how I would sort of tackle like a bit of a weaker GPA or optimized GPA. In terms of healthcare hours, obviously more is always better. So that's one area that if you continue to work in medicine, like you have control over that. You have control over how many hours you want to work. So that's something that you can change. And then I would say just making sure that you are, target the programs that you want to get into, find out what they're specifically looking for by looking in online resources and going to their information sessions and asking individual questions, and really trying to adapt your application to fit those programs specifically.
That is all great advice that I hope everyone really, really listens to, even if they have to go back and listen again. Take that advice. Well, where can everyone kind of find you and follow along? I know we connected, I think, on Instagram. So
yeah. So I have an Instagram account. It's Emergency Med Mentor. And so you can follow along with me there. I post some teaching content, mostly related to emergency medicine and acute care topics, but I also post a lot about just my teaching role at school. So people can feel free to reach out to me there to get acquainted. But this was super fun.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, and I hope that, in this time of COVID-19 that you and your family continue to stay safe.
Yeah, yours too. Do you think that's going to affect applications at all? That's something else people keep asking about.
Sure.
And
yeah,
I mean, I could see it maybe pushing interviews back. I don't know that it'll keep CASPA from opening, but I don't know.
Yeah, I would think that because CASPA is, a completely digital system, that it wouldn't delay sort of the reviewing of applications. That would be my hope anyway. And I think you're absolutely right that the question is, what would the interview structure be like? Like, how might that change? So that may be delayed a little bit.
Yeah, and
would it start? Yeah.
Well, I think students are worried too with their classes being moved to online. If schools are going to take that into account, and volunteering and shadowing and sure. Even their patient care positions kind of being maybe not. They've been told to stay home, so
yeah,
and so that I don't know what that's gonna mean, but we'll see, I guess.
yeah, we'll see as it all unfolds. I'm hoping that, with all of the hard and frustrating things that there are, that it'll be great fuel for creative writing for those personal statements. and we'll go from there.
You're going to get a lot of coronavirus essays this year. I feel quite certain. So
yeah.
Not a bad thing.
I'm looking forward to it. Yeah. It's a very unique time, so it'll be good.
Yeah, we'll see.
Alrighty. Well, thank you.